Esteemed audience, tonight, the part of Andy will be played by Amy Frost.
Mr. Copley?
Mr. Booker, bonjour. It's a pleasure to finally meet you.
Last time I checked, you had to be an American to be in the CIA.
I was born in Boston, moved to London when I was 3.
So why did you leave the agency, Mr. Copley?
My wife got sick. ALS. She died 2 years ago. Just haven't found my way back yet.
Sorry for your loss.
Thank you. You haven't aged a day, Booker.
Trust me, I have.
Yeah. And scene. Hello, and welcome to the Picture Show with Austin and Phil Rood. I am Phil Rood. I'm the dad.
And I'm Austin Rood. I'm the son. Every week we watch a movie and then we talk about it.
That's right. And today we're going to sound probably a little bit different. We are coming from the dining hall of stately Rood Manor.
It's a new setting.
It is a temporary setting this week. My office is a little bit noisy as we're recording. So we've brought it out into the main hall here. So apologies if the sound quality is not a different brand of low end, I guess.
We're making do.
We are making do. Austin, what have you been putting in your brain this week? You still hanging in with the West Wing?
I am, yeah. One of my friends is a political buff, and he convinced me to watch The West Wing. And at first, I was like really skeptical because I'm not a big fan of like political dramas. Like, I don't like the idea of thinking of politicians as humans. If that makes sense, like, I don't want to trust politicians is the thing. So I'm a little wary of it, but I think
you do understand the concept of make-believe and
yes, I know.
Okay, I'm just saying.
I'm just saying it could create a bias when I look at politicians.
Sure, you have to understand the West Wing is a political drama and a television show, and
also 20 years out of date.
It is 20 years old. It is, and I am not overly familiar with the West Wing, but I am semi-familiar with Aaron Sorkin, and I know that's one of his babies. He also did a show back in the day called Sports Night. I think maybe
I haven't heard of that.
Maybe right before the West Wing. It only lasted a season. It didn't really get much of an audience, but it was super good. It was a really good show.
Okay.
It was about like behind the scenes of like an ESPN type sports network.
So it's another kind of workplace drama.
It wasn't about sports. It was about this TV show crew.
Right.
Yeah, it was.
That's kind of the same thing.
Yeah. It was a very interesting show and sort of, I think for a lot of us, sort of our first introduction to Aaron Sorkin.
I think he's good at what he does.
He's very good at what he does. Molly's Game, I believe, is one of the few things he's directed as well. Really, really solid movie.
All right.
Highly recommend.
What have you been up to?
Not much this week. Has been a little scattered. I've not taken time to watch very much. Just basically our movie for today. Legend of Korra, to call back to our Avatar episode. Legend of Korra has dropped.
It has.
Just a couple of days ago on Netflix. I've not started it yet. Partly because of time constraints, but I have come to realize I also have a bit of apprehension about starting it in a way I should have had apprehension about extra Star Wars trilogies. Here's this thing that exists very much perfect on its own. I'm not sure if I want anything beyond that. I am going to watch it, but I do have apprehension about it. But there are things that like I've come to realize this journey of self-discovery started with The Legend of Korra coming to Netflix. But like like I've not watched the Peter Jackson Hobbit movies because I liked the Lord of the Rings, and I don't. Part of it is that it's a trilogy, and I just
stretching out this
really
material.
stretching out this 300-page book. But there's these things that I love so much just as they are that I kind of get to a point where I go, I don't want any more. I want this to just exist. I took a long time to start watching Better Call Saul because I'm a huge Breaking Bad fan.
And now you love Better Call Saul.
I do. I like Better Call Saul a lot. I don't love it.
Okay.
I don't love it in the same way, but it has not taken away from Breaking Bad. I know these things don't take away from the original thing.
Yeah.
I find myself a little bit gun shy about adding to the universe.
I can see that. Mm-hmm. And I think there are some... Korra does a few things where they kind of take away from, like, the perfect ending that was Avatar.
Sure.
But they also expand in a lot of cool ways.
That's interesting. I am looking forward to jumping in. I'm just a little bit gun shy. I think at some point this week I am going to start, and we are going to do some episodes about Korra.
I can't wait.
I
really can't.
I'm
already halfway through book 1. Like,
don't amp it up anymore. That I'm already a little bit nervous about it. But that's it. I haven't really had much viewing or reading this week, except for what we watched today. We watched the 2020 action movie, The Old Guard. This is a Netflix movie starring Charlize Theron, Kiki Lane, and Chiwetel Ejiofor. It is directed by Gina Prince Blythewood and written by Greg Rucka, based on the graphic novel series that he also wrote.
Well, that's cool that he's the same writer.
I thought it was cool that they brought him to adapt his own work. I always kind of like that when that way sort of the tone gets right. You know what I mean? Or the end result, the vision is sort of kept intact, I feel like, a little bit better.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to do adaptions.
Let's jump back one more time to the Avatar live action series. We found out this past week the creators of the animated series have left the live action adaptation over creative differences.
Yeah, that's kind of divided the fandom. A lot of people are upset.
I get being upset. I'm not, as I said, I wasn't super looking forward to, I wasn't, like I said, the animated series is so perfect, I don't really care about a live action series.
Yeah,
but
this is even more, this is further than just Korra continuing the story. This is like, we're going to retell the story, and if it's bad, it's going to totally ruin it.
And to have a difference with the actual creator reminds me of the American Gods TV series.
Oh, that was a disaster.
It was not great. It had some moments. I really liked some parts of it. But there was a point in season 1 where Neil Gaiman threatened to leave if they did this one thing with the characters, because he's like, you guys are missing the entire point if you don't get these characters, this.
It's so sad when studios do that.
And so it is encouraging to see, before I started this movie, I just watched it this morning, that Greg Rucka adapted his own source material here. So it is sort of like, oh, this keeps Greg Rucka's story intact, and he's able to bring it to this format and tell the story, and make sure that his points and his characters are coming across in the way that he wants them. And I like that. That being said,
oh boy,
I did not particularly care for this movie. I picked this movie out because you recommended it to me. And with that,
So I'm to blame for all that's to come in this episode.
I'm afraid I'm going to just have to ask you to leave my house.
I'll pack my things.
I have supported you through many things, but this is a bridge too far. No, I do need you to leave the house, but I'm not trying to be over dramatic about it.
Well, of course.
I mean, clearly, this is the thing that's going to break our relationship apart. This movie is not bad. For me, it's almost the worst offense where it is just forgettable. It is just there. It's just flat. I would rather it take a big swing and be terrible because it took a chance than to kind of half-ass every concept that they brought to the table.
I'm interested because I was worried you were going to say that you just outright thought it was bad. And I don't see where you're coming from because I don't think this was a good movie.
I don't think it's good. When I say I don't think it's bad, I don't want to make it sound like, oh, this is an offensive movie at every turn. This is terribly executed. But I wouldn't call this a good movie. I think it's a forgettable movie. I think it has some moments. I think it brings some concepts to the table that are super interesting, but it never follows through on them. It only drops them and then sort of just moves on. There's a series of action set pieces and fight scenes throughout this movie. And I feel like everything in between there is just dropping exposition, bringing up ideas that we never come back to, and moving us towards the next fight scene. That's really it in a nutshell. I don't think this movie has much substance beyond that.
That's interesting. I just don't feel the same way. I don't know. I liked the characters. I liked the concepts that they were bringing. And I do agree that the plot is a little all over the place. Like, the first half of the movie, I didn't understand where we were going with this. Like, what's the goal?
Right.
What are they trying to get? But I don't know. I liked it.
And I'm not going to begrudge anybody for liking this movie. You know,
except you are kicking me out.
I am kicking you out of the house because I can't have this movie watched again and again in my house.
It's on your Netflix account.
I'm going to have to cancel Netflix. No, this movie, I feel like it has some, like, I liked Charlize Theron in this. I think she's good, but I mean, it's Charlize Theron. I expect her to be good no matter what she's doing.
That's Andy, right?
That's Andy.
Okay.
She never phones anything in. So it's not like I didn't expect a good performance. It's sort of like CGI. When people go, yeah, the movie's not great, but the CGI is good. It's like, it's 2020. The CGI should be good. There's no excuse for it not being good.
Yeah.
You know, Charlize Theron's in this movie. Of course she's good. She's Charlize Theron. But I've seen her play the badass lady warrior. Just, it's not that I've seen her play it better. I've seen the roles written better. Mad Max Fury Road, Atomic Blonde. She can play this character. I just don't think it's in. I know Greg Rucka's a great comic writer. I don't know that he's a great movie writer. I don't know that he brought something. I think something that is two-dimensional or maybe falls flat as a movie. I think maybe it fits in a comic book so much better. And that's not to degrade the medium of comics or anything. I just think that the more straightforward visual storytelling and the way that the pacing is up to the reader in comics, it works better there.
I do agree that this story is better suited for comics. Like, you can tell they're planning to make sequels with this. And it's kind of just like, when I finished the movie, I was like, I wanted more because I knew this isn't...
Oh, you're going to get it.
This isn't all the story. Yes. Like, they're almost pulling punches.
For sure.
Like, they're holding back because they have these bigger ideas that they want to execute later.
They planted seeds here. And they also did the comic book thing where it's like, oh, she's dying. And then they're like, nah, she's fine. Like,
yeah, what was that?
That's what I'm talking about. A really interesting idea of a character who is immortal slowly becoming mortal. How interesting is that? And then at the end of the movie, it's just like, nah, she's good. She's good. She's fine.
The fact that she was still alive at the end baffled me.
She should have died at the end of this. That's the only way to. We'll get deeper into this.
I agree with you there, but I don't think it diminishes from the movie as a whole.
By the way, Charlize Theron has played a version of this character also in a movie that is very popular that I also did not like. Is Hancock with Will Smith.
Oh, I've seen that.
Yeah.
I don't remember it that much. I don't remember her being in it.
She is, connected to Breaking Bad. That movie's actually written by Vince Gilligan, who is the creator of Breaking Bad.
Okay.
Before he did Breaking Bad. It's the concept is that she and Will Smith are essentially gods. They're these immortal, superpowered beings that have gone through time together and keep reconnecting. And when they come together, they start to lose their powers. I don't like that movie, but I think that concept is super interesting. And I think at the end of the day, they didn't quite execute it well, but they were at least exploring that concept. Here, the concept gets brought in, it gets dropped in your lap, we're shown her breaking down, and then they just abandon that by the end of the movie. And it's just such a non-committal movie.
The thing is, I agree, but again, I just don't think that
if you're entertained by it, I don't want to. I'm not saying you. I'm saying for me, it falls short. That's what makes it fall short.
Okay.
But I do think.
However, can I say I feel like part of what plays into that is the fact that these are immortals who are tired of being immortal. So like, Andy doesn't care why she's immortal anymore. She right. doesn't. She's not exploring these ideas.
Again, but that's a concept too that is introduced and not really followed up on. We don't really explore how exhausted with living forever Andy is. It's brought up a few times, but that's it. I don't feel like it's really explored in a meaningful way. Instead of exploring that, we go into another fight scene. And that's what drags this movie out for me.
You say that it gets dropped, but I feel like these concepts at the end tied together when the CIA operative, when he shows them that he's been tracking them throughout the ages.
We're going to talk about that too.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
I felt like that sort of tied the concepts together.
It does tie the
answered some questions.
Every concept is tied together. Every concept is there. It's just on a surface level. That's my complaint with it. We're going to get into it more in a few minutes. I don't want to take the deep dive because we do need to put a break in here. So let's take a break.
All right.
And then we'll come back and I will show you how wrong you are.
We'll do that.
Okay. We're back.
Welcome back.
Welcome back. How was your break?
It felt immortal. It just would not die.
Would not end.
Yeah.
I was dreading. Get me through this podcast. I don't even care about doing it anymore.
I forgot we were doing the podcast.
I forgot to even care about this podcast until I found another young podcaster in my dream.
That's crazy.
That is crazy. Yes, immortality. Let's talk about it.
All right.
Here's my problem with immortal characters. They have no stakes. It is the same thing about like Superman, Wolverine. It is so easy to make them. They're especially in a movie like this where it is so much fight scenes and you know they can't die. Why are we spending all this time watching them fight, knowing that they are ultimately going to win?
I tend to agree with you, but I also feel like with Andy, they upped the stakes so that during the climax, there is that tension of, is she going to die?
Oh, yeah, no, by the end of it, when she is falling apart, before they abandon that concept.
Right.
You're right. That's the only time you start to go, oh, she could die at this point. But other than that, all these other fight scenes they have, there's just nothing to them. There, not only is she immortal, but like she's cutting through these people like with no problem at all. There's no back and forth. There's no struggle in the fight at all. It's not like a Jason Bourne fight, or again, I'm going to reference this because I think people should see it, Atomic Blonde. There's some brutal fight scenes in that. And if they wanted to make this truly brutal, I think there would have been some better fight choreography that felt like there was some tension in these fights. This looks very beautiful and very slick.
Right.
But when I watch a fight scene, I want to see some back and forth. I want to see some punches getting thrown around. I want to see some damage on both sides. And I want to know that the protagonist could lose.
I see your point there.
I mean, maybe it's nitpicky, but it's part of the reason this whole movie fell flat for me. The one exception is what's her name? The new recruit.
Niall.
Right. Niall and Andy fighting on the plane.
Right.
Like, that was a cool fight. You know, these two immortal people, but also like they were both getting shots in. There was both back and forth, and you could see like Andy's like laughing when she gets a punch landed on her. She's like, "Ooh, this kid's good," and this is a challenge for me for the first time.
That fight is also more of a mental battle.
Sure.
It's all about Niall is sort of in denial. Niall in denial.
Ooh, meaning.
Right?
Yeah. I stand corrected.
No, I think that the reason that fight had more weight to it was because of that.
Yeah, no, I mean, it was playful. It was entertaining. It was interesting in a way, and it was sort of classic comic book team-up kind of thing, where the two heroes meet, and they don't like each other, and then they slowly, you know what I mean? Like the Avengers, all of these things where comic book, you know,
right.
And that's Greg Rucka doing this comic book trope in the movie. And it actually, like that whole sequence when she basically goes and kidnaps her, you know, she shoots her in the head in the desert, all that stuff like really worked for me. And I was still on board at that point. But it was after that is when everything sort of started declining for me. And I feel like there was just a lack of stakes and a lack of tension in the movie.
I agree, but I didn't see it as like you don't need tension in a fight scene. I think like that church fight scene where she's just mowing them down.
Yeah.
I saw that as this is an example of how effortlessly she can fight and how old she is. I didn't see that as we're supposed to be worried about her.
I get that too, but they had already shown us that 2 or 3 times.
I guess, yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
Redundant.
That's what I'm saying. By the time we're going from set piece to set piece, you know, action to action to action, you need to be bringing something to those action scenes. They need to have some tension to them. Otherwise, they're just... It's like putting a dance number in. There's no... You're just watching people move through it.
Right.
And that's fine. Like, it's not a badly choreographed movement scene. It's just kind of a boring fight scene at that point. I wanted to see more struggle. I wanted to see something more than just shooting guns and swinging the axe around and just mowing down everybody who's in front of them. It's disposable bad guys.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like here's this army of soldiers. And again, I think this is a problem with this in a movie. I don't want to keep coming down hard on this story or these concepts or Greg Rucka as a comic book writer. I'm very curious about this as a graphic novel. I want to check this out because I think this probably works better as a comic than as a movie.
How would there be any difference in tension in a graphic novel?
Because a graphic novel and comics are every panel is just representative of a moment in time, as opposed to actually seeing the movement. You fill in the blanks with it. You set the pace for it. It's a little bit. This is going to sound like it's a shot at comics. I love comics. I'm not taking a shot at it. It's a two-dimensional art form.
Yeah.
As opposed to, I know movies, a TV is technically two-dimensional as well, but it's bigger. There's sound. There's pacing set by the director. There's all of these other elements that make it more of a three-dimensional space. I think this is a two-dimensional story that didn't translate well to a three-dimensional space.
Are you saying that fight scenes in comics, there's more involvement because, like, it's more engaging because you're basically directing the comic?
Kind of.
As opposed to this where you're just watching a fight and you don't care what happens.
You can get to a fight scene in a comic and it can seem enormous, and then you look at it and it's 3 pages. You know what I mean? It's not half of the book. What you get in a comic is you get the keyframes, and you can sit and stare at each frame, at each panel, and you can take as much time as you want with it, or you can breeze through it. Whatever gets you through it. It is a partnership kind of to read a comic as opposed to being fed a movie. I feel like the reader has control in a comic book. And I think Greg Rucka bringing these visuals, or I don't know who the artist on that series is. I should have looked that up before it started. And by the way, I did look at some of the artwork online. It's a beautiful looking book.
Really?
It really is. It's very cool looking. I really do want to check out the comic. I just don't think it translates to a movie very well. Or it wasn't translated to a movie very well. I'm not saying it can't be done. I just think there were some ideas in here that could have been better fleshed out. And there was just a lack of tension. I was kind of bored through this movie. And it could be the fact that I think this movie is about 20 to 30 minutes too long.
It's a little long.
It's over 2 hours, and I feel like they could have brought it home in a bit shorter time than that.
I actually took a break while watching it.
I did too.
I didn't mean to, but I did. So I kind of watched it in 2 halves. There was an intermission. So that might have changed my perspective on it.
Well, I got to a point where I thought it was getting near the end, and I looked at the clock, and there was like 35 minutes left. And I was like, you have got to be kidding me. We're about wrapping this thing up. And nope, it kept going. So there's a problem with the pace of your movie when you're tracking it. I should lose track of time in a good movie.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Okay, can we talk about the characters?
Please.
Because I think that is one of the pros of this movie.
Okay. Go ahead.
I liked the characters. That's that's in the most basic form. It was mainly Andy and Niall. They were really the heart of this movie for me. Watching this sort of mentorship, where Andy is teaching Niall basically to be her replacement as the leader of this group.
Sure.
And there were even just like side characters that made the world feel more lived in for me. Like, one of the best examples is when Andy is stabbed and she's not healing, so she goes to the store.
Oh,
and
yeah.
this random store clerk just helps her out and is a kind person. And we never see her again. But that's just a
Right.
character that stands
Right.
out.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, that's fair. I think there are some. I think there are some interesting characters in here, and maybe this is just about me, but I don't think any of these characters were fleshed out to their potential. I think we scratched the surface of a lot of them. Niall, in particular, is shown to be a religious person, and that is never explored. That is never really fleshed out. That's where they butt heads at the very beginning. She's like, "What are you praying?" and she's mocking her.
Yeah.
And then at the end, when is it Booker?
Yeah.
He's like banished for 100 years or whatever, and he's like, "Oh, that means I'm never going to see you again." And Andy goes, "Have a little faith." And I'm like, that's the faith exploration of this movie. Is you went from mocking someone for praying, you've not discussed it since then, and now you are a faithful person.
That's weird. I didn't catch that.
I caught it because it was brought up and never addressed again. Like, that's the problem with this movie. They go to the effort of showing Niall's cross all the time. It's constantly on the outside of her clothes while she's fighting in a war even. Sorry, the sun catches that. That's a huge, dangerous thing.
Very weird.
Yes. It is constantly being shown. She makes a big deal about, my God is real. It's never brought up again. There's all this potential to have Andy just be this person who has lost her way, has lost her idea of humanity is worth fighting for. And maybe this kid comes in and reinvigorates her. And maybe that's what is implied, and maybe that's what we're supposed to infer, but I didn't get it. I just got, here's this theme of faith. We're not going to talk about it, but at the end, just know it's resolved. And it maybe there's a scene. Maybe there's a scene that got cut because this movie was 4 hours or whatever. But I don't know. It just rang so hollow. But it's so much potential for these characters to explore, but they didn't do it in favor of having more fight scenes with no tension in them.
You are making me realize that a lot of the most interesting parts of this story were sidelined for this kind of boring plot that they were so committed to.
The plot is very simple, actually.
Yeah.
Big Pharma.
And it's actually a question. It's like a moral question in itself. Is it ethical for them to keep mortality to themselves?
These are all themes that could have been explored in this movie and made it a much more interesting movie than it was. And that's where I think this movie fell flat for me, is that it had so much potential that it just didn't explore. And the way this movie ends with, a lead in to the next movie, just makes me think, oh, they're just trying to shotgun themselves into a franchise as opposed to taking their time and making one good movie at a time. You know what I mean? Like,
you might be right.
Netflix is trying to have their own, superhero franchise. And I don't begrudge them that. I don't mind anybody who wants to set up a superhero franchise, but make me a good movie. Don't just...
You can't build it on this foundation that's shoddy.
Right. I think the other thing about the potential that I saw in this movie is that if this movie had just been a generic, fight through the corporate structure of Big Pharma, we want to kidnap these immortal beings and they just have to fight to get them back. If it had just been that and they hadn't introduced all these other themes, I'd have been like, yeah, that's fine. This movie is exactly what it is. But this movie is trying to be something else without doing the work to be something else, something bigger than that. And that's where I think it fell flat for me.
You're definitely winning this conversation because...
You just want to move back in.
No,
oh my God.
I miss my bed, okay? No, I went in thinking this movie is great because I had fun with it.
If you
I
had
did.
fun with it, it's not a failure. I'm not begrudging anybody who likes this movie.
But you're also right in that this movie fails somewhat on a structural level.
Look, there are movies that are failed movies that I enjoy very much. There are movies like Primer. Primer does not exist in a vacuum. Primer is such a complicated movie that if you don't have several advanced degrees in engineering and astrophysics and the mechanics of time travel, you cannot watch that movie without reading outside articles to understand exactly what's happening and making diagrams. I mean, it is a complicated movie.
Yes.
I love it. I love that movie, but it is an absolute failure as a movie. Same with 2001, which is a classic science fiction movie. That movie is made with a book that was written at the same time. It is made it is a collaboration between Arthur C. Clarke and Stanley Kubrick to create this sort of multimedia experience. None of it exists in a vacuum by itself. In that way, it's kind of a failure as a movie, but as a multimedia experience, it's really something.
That's interesting.
It's an interesting movie on its own, but you can't quite get your head around it. I'm sure there are people who can, but I mean, like, as far as being a movie, every movie should be self-contained. You should be able to understand what's going on without reading source material, without reading outside articles. The movie has to deliver that stuff to you. There are movies like that I really enjoy that fail on that level. It's okay to enjoy a movie that isn't technically perfect. I don't want to bag on you for liking this movie or for having fun with it. I think I saw a lot of stuff online today. People like this movie.
Really? I haven't heard anyone talking about it, so I just assumed.
I saw just some headlines that were like, the old guard is big, loud fun. They understand what it is. They're not suggesting it's a cinematic masterpiece, but people are having fun with this movie.
Right.
You're not alone, and I'm probably being kind of an a-hole about it, but this movie just fell flat for me.
I don't think you're being an a-hole.
I don't want you to backpedal on liking it or feel like you have to be apologetic for it.
No, I'm not going to stop liking it.
Just don't watch it around me. No, I'm just joking.
You're actually holding it to a higher standard. That kind of shows that you liked what this movie had to offer, and you're disappointed that it didn't do it as well as you think it could have.
I'm holding this movie to the standard that the movie presented. They presented these big ideas and then didn't follow up on them.
Right.
If they had never presented them, I would probably like this movie more. But because they presented them, I expect them to follow up on them and deliver them to me in at least an interesting way. Take the swing. You have a pitch coming to you. Take the swing. Even if you miss, you're at least trying to explore this concept of an immortal being tired of life. We saw that in Logan.
Right.
This immortal being who is tired of life and is breaking down. We've seen things like that in Highlander. Highlander is about an immortal man who has to fight other immortal beings. There are stakes involved in that because the rules are set up to say if you're fighting another immortal, you can die, and that's the only way you can die. And it also explores his loved ones that he's outlived and the toll that's taken.
Right. There's a more kid-friendly example in Doctor Who.
Okay.
It's kind of the same thing. They explore that several times. It's like a reoccurring theme that the Doctor's this immortal being. So
sure.
He has to deal with loss and he doesn't have a normal life.
All of these things are presented and actually almost followed up on. The fact that these are immortal beings who have found each other and sort of banded together because they know the struggle of being immortal and having fought through all of the, the Crusades and the Napoleonic Wars and things like that.
They have united experiences.
Right. That stuff is really interesting to me, and I think it did those things and actually kind of went a little deeper into those as character development, but really it was mostly done out of the sake of like providing an origin story for these characters. Like, I didn't need to see a flashback to every single. I guess they didn't do they did the flashback of like the witch trials,
right?
Which was, I think, mostly there to set up the next movie.
The witch thing is very disjointed in this,
right? But it was interesting. I didn't need to see a flashback to it, but it was interesting. Like, it was all backstory, but so much of this in between fight scenes was just exposition. Like we talk about the plot, and the plot is just sort of simple. It's almost a side thought to this entire movie, It's
really minor compared to the other concepts that they cover.
Yeah, I think so. I want to talk about a couple of like character inconsistencies that I think were just really sloppy as well. And I know I'm just beating the tar out of this movie at this point, but
it's not a fair fight at this point.
Well, there's just stuff that bothered me throughout. Like the CIA guy, is like he sanctions the kidnapping of these two immortals and the human lab rat kind of aspect of that, where they're basically torturing these guys. And then when they find out Andy's not immortal anymore, he's like, well, we'll just kill her. And he's like, wait, that's murder. And it's like, dude, you are the most corrupt guy in this movie. But also, like, he's like, oh, I totally respect your, what you guys do, and I'm tracking all of this. And all of that was just super inconsistent. I think that character was potentially so interesting.
Okay, that's one thing where I think you're totally out of left field here. I think that character was a great example. I think the immortal who betrayed them, that was a bad example. That was like out of character.
That was just cliche.
It was, but you can see him in a lot of scenes questioning himself. And they explained it pretty well, that he had the idea that he was going to help the world. He was going to make this big medical breakthrough and save people like his wife.
Right.
And that's what he thought he was out to do. And then he realized this company is not ethical at
right.
all.
He's the ethical CIA agent.
Fair. He went into this expecting it to go differently.
Sure. I mean,
so he had this principle that he was like, yes, they deserve to share their gift with the world. Like, they can't hoard it to themselves, so I'm gonna take them in. I'm gonna kidnap them.
But
and make them give it up.
That's also contrary, though, to his whole bulletin board, where he's like, that's showing that they're not hoarding it to themselves, that they are sharing with humanity. Here's this person that they saved back then, and their grandson or whatever it was, is the ripple effect of that. He's sitting there with examples of the service they are doing to humanity already.
But that's a much more subtle service. You're right that he's a hypocrite for not seeing that, but that's a much more subtle example, and he's someone who just lost his wife.
Right.
He's hurting, and he wants to help people.
I get that that's why that was in there.
Way.
I just feel like it was shoehorned in there to give him a reason, to give him a motivation that he really didn't need, because he already had a motivator the other way. It's almost like it should have been two different characters. Like, one guy who's like, oh, here's what they do for humanity. And then another guy who's like, oh, I just lost my wife, so therefore that's my my supervillain setup. Now, all that said, I do like the bad guy turns in this. I like that they explore that he did this thing, but he doesn't feel good about it, and now he's going to help them. I like that that Booker betrayed them and then fought with them, and that they essentially voted to exile him. Like, they're like, we can't kill him, and they still they understand why he like that.
They didn't just forgive him. There were consequences.
There are consequences, and they also sort of understand where he's coming from, and they're like, look, go meditate on this for 100 years. We'll get back together, and we'll move forward, and we'll move past it. Like,
sure.
There's these ideas that, like, people are not, it's not black and white people. That there are shades of gray in people, that people make missteps. That's a character concept that I love that this movie did, that this story did, is that it didn't just make the bad guys out and out bad. They're just sort of like, people are redeemable. I mean, the big bad guy, of course, because who doesn't hate drug companies? But like, I really did enjoy that. I loved the end when she stands with him on the beach and says, we'll meet you in 100 years. And he says something like, I hoped it would be less, but I expected it to be more.
Right.
And he's sad that he thinks he won't see her again. I think that was really interesting. And I like the idea of shades of gray in these characters. And I do give this movie props for that, for having, no matter how clumsily it may have been handled coming through that, that they had these sort of redeemable, I don't even want to say they're villains, because they're not even really the bad guys.
They're antagonists.
They're right. They're tools of the villain. But then there was other character moments like Niall flaking out and like, oh, I'm leaving.
Oh, that was totally just for plot.
It was
that
terrible.
was just so that she wasn't caught with the rest of them.
A scene ahead of that, they're looking at pictures of her dad, who's, by the way, going to come back as an immortal in some future movie.
What?
Come on.
I don't... Where did you get that?
He was killed in action, and then at the end when she goes, oh yeah, the CIA guy's going to make it look like I was killed in action. I think it's all set up. Her dad is going to be back in a future.
I thought you meant he's coming back from the grave. No, or something.
I think he's an immortal too.
Maybe.
But yeah, they're looking at pictures of her dad, and they're like, "Oh, you're a warrior. You come from warriors." And she's like, "Yeah, I was taught to never back down." And then they're like, "Okay, let's go storm the bad guy." And she goes, "Nah, I'm out." It's just like, you're backing down. You're absolutely contradicting your whole backstory that you gave one scene earlier. I thought that was a giant snafu in the script that should have been addressed.
I think what Niall, her character development in this movie, is learning why they fight. She learns they're immortal, and she's up for a fight, but she doesn't understand what they're doing. She doesn't get the goal. And so I feel like she leaves, and then she comes back, and then she learns about what they've been doing with the bulletin board. And I feel like that kind of gives her the motivation. It's a cheap way to do it. You're right.
I just think it was a giant contradiction, and she should have either gone or not. You know, instead of having or cut that conversation about like, oh, you're a total warrior, and she's like, I never back down, and then like they go, okay, let's go fight the bad guy. And she's like, no, I'm out.
Actually, I've got plans.
And she's like, I'm backing down. I mean, it is in direct conflict with, as far as character development. You're gonna put this in that whole conversation about her dad was purely to be backstory on the character. On Niall.
Yeah.
And then she, like, literally 5 minutes later is doing something in direct conflict with that. And it's that kind of writing I think is just sloppy. And I think that's the same reason that big concepts weren't followed up on here. I think there was no attention to detail in the script in fleshing it out into a full movie.
I don't think that it was a lack of attention to detail. I just don't think they knew what to focus on.
That's a really good way of putting it. Like, this movie has ADD where it's all over the place.
They want to make a commentary on war. They want to make
Sure.
a commentary on immortality and what it means to live and die. And they want to set up this cinematic universe. And they want
to talk about faith. And they want to talk about
pharma.
About being faced with an impossibility that you're an immortal person. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. No, that's a really, really solid point that I hadn't really considered, that maybe it's not laziness. Maybe it's too much ambition. Maybe it's trying too hard to talk about too many things, as opposed to focusing on one or two of those things and fleshing that out into this movie.
Right. Well, you have to keep in mind, too, this is an adaptation. So this is a story he's already written. He has it in his head.
Right.
He has these main ideas that he needs to get across and set up everything. So he's not coming at it from this fresh perspective of, I'm just going to tell a story. It's more complicated than that.
Right. He's and also this is a series of graphic novels. So he could be pulling from several,
That's true, too.
several books worth of themes and sort of funneling them into. And you also see this with and I don't know how much Greg Rucka has written for screen, but you see this in like new filmmakers sometimes, where I'm making this movie. I don't know if I'm going to make another one. So I'm going to put as much of my ideas into this one,
Right.
just in case this is the only movie I make. You know what I mean? Like, so, no, that's a really interesting thing I hadn't considered, that maybe as far as the writing of a book goes, maybe I said that comics are more two-dimensional, but maybe in writing in general is more three-dimensional. It's bigger ideas.
Yes.
And maybe that is what didn't translate to screen, as far as like maybe all the back, like people always say, like the book, not comics, but like regular books are always better. They're not. But like the general,
That's the idea.
The general idea is that books are better because you can put inner monologue. You can put a lot more things in a book that don't translate to screen.
Yeah, I think screen is just harder in general.
Depending on the story, sure, but I think you've brought up a really solid point.
I try.
I think that's a really interesting idea, where I was looking at this as lazier than it is. It's almost, I think now that you say that, maybe you're right. It's overambitious. It's too much.
The way I'm looking at this movie, the way I'm sitting right now is, you've kind of shown me what the flaws in this movie. Like, I felt like, there's things are a little flat, and there were some pacing issues, but I couldn't put it into words.
Right.
Why I had a problem with it. So you've helped me figure out what the flaws in this movie are, but I still see it as a plus, because I'm looking at this as like a pilot episode. Like, this is the start of something, and I think they can build this into something better. Like, I really want to see what happens with the witch. Like, it looks like she's going to be the villain of the next story.
Right.
And
right.
Yeah.
No, look, I'm not trying to change your mind. I'm not trying to tell you
I know
that you shouldn't like this movie.
This isn't a debate.
I mean, you like this movie and you want to see more. Cool. I want to read the comics. I want to go and read how this plays in a book. I'm not trying to downplay the story as a whole. I'm calling it as I saw it, and you're showing me that yes, I have criticisms of this movie, and you're sort of refining your analysis is sort of informing. You're allowing me to criticize this better. No, but my argument against like a pilot episode, I get that. It's something to get off the ground. Everybody knows the first movie in a series, just like a pilot, it has to explain certain things.
Yeah.
But I still, like, I don't cut series slack. If you can't grab me in a couple episodes, you know, people who go, you got to get through the first season. You got to get through the first 6 or 7 episodes. No. If it takes you that long to get a hold of me, you're doing it wrong.
But this did grab you. You just said it yourself. You want to read the comic. You want to explore this story more.
Sure.
You have issues with how it played out.
I'm saying
but
a crappy pilot episode, you can't say, well, it's a pilot. A pilot is the thing that is
Okay.
supposed to determine whether or not something goes forward or not. It still has to be entertaining. It can't just be exposition. You have to entertain me.
have we considered that, just like in this movie, the pilot is playing dead?
Okay.
That was a bad pun. I'm
Get
sorry.
out. I'm not joking. Get out right now.
And that was the last episode of the picture show.
Well, now it's the picture show with Phil Rood. With
Phil
Logan.
and more Phil.
Logan, get in here. Yeah, that's about all the notes I have. I've exhausted my complaints about this movie. I've tried to sing it some praise too. I think this movie did some things very well. I think adding a little more tension, dropping some exposition. If they come out with a second movie and everyone's like, "Oh my God, it's so much better," I'd be willing to take a look at it. You know what I mean?
But are you gonna trust if I say that?
No,
Based on
no,
Yeah,
absolutely not. No, if
exactly.
somebody I trust tells me, no, look, like if they come out and they go, look, all these issues that you had issue with, you know, a lot of them are fixed. A lot of things are more streamlined. Maybe they bring a different director in. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
sometimes it's just, and I don't think this movie is poorly directed. It looks great. This movie really does look good.
It does.
I don't think this movie's poorly directed. I think, except for like I said, the fight scenes are a little boring. Some directors just aren't action directors. I mean,
Yeah.
honest to God,
That's just how it plays out sometimes.
watch the first Christopher Nolan Batman movie. Like Nolan was not an action director at all at the time, and those fight scenes are just a mess because he didn't know how to shoot a fight scene. So. Yeah, I think the action scenes are a little bit boring, and that's fine if they had beefed up the story and if they fix that in future movies that we all know are coming.
Right.
Like, I think that would be cool. I think there's a lot of potential here. I really do. But that said, if this hadn't been the assignment for this week, I would have shut this movie off halfway through.
Okay.
Like it.
I think that's fair.
It just didn't hold me, and that is. I think if they had taken a big swing poorly, it would have been better than something that just bored me. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Like for me, that's almost a bigger offense. But yeah, I don't know. I don't want to write this off completely. All these complaints aside. Like I said, at least I'm going to look at comics
Yeah.
and I'm going to see what future movies bring, because I think there is potential here. What about you? I wouldn't even not recommend this to somebody because I know people who would really enjoy this movie.
Yeah. I would recommend this.
I'm just saying this movie is not really for me. If I went to a friend's house and this was on, I would sit and watch it.
Okay.
I mean, I would probably MST3K it, you know, but like I don't hate this movie. It just fell flat for me.
Yeah. You have some disagreements.
Right. So, and I like to bitch about movies that are boring to me. So,
Yeah.
that's what I've done. I'm sorry I've taken this entire episode over with complaints.
No, it's fine.
But I mean, would you recommend this just as a blanket recommendation to people? Or is there like a
would.
specific person or type of person that you're like, yeah, this is for you, not for you, you know?
Overall, I think this is like a general recommendation. Like,
Okay.
I think the average moviegoer would like this movie.
I think that's fair.
Yeah. And if I knew someone who was specifically into action, or one of the things I think this movie did best, which we didn't even cover, was the soft magic system with the immortality and just how they play with that.
And
I
the
thought
like
was
the
really
psychic
cool.
dreams.
Yeah.
Sure.
I
No.
thought the way they connected everything, I thought that was it's a good example of a magic system.
I can appreciate when people can have a story that's grounded in a reality and still put a system, a paranormal or supernatural element in there and make it seem like, oh, this is part of the world.
Yeah.
Like it's an anomaly.
It never seemed silly.
Right. Right. I mean, it was just part of the rules of the world. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? So yeah, I think that's fair. I do think this movie benefits from being a Netflix movie. I think Netflix makes sort of the best TV movie you've ever seen. Like
Yes.
like it like
I would not, like, I saw the trailer for this and I was like excited to see it, but I would not have gone to the theater to see this.
That's what I think. I don't think this movie is a success in theaters. I think a lot of movies that are performing well on Netflix, people are taking that and going, "Oh, look, people are interested in original properties." I think if you put that in a movie theater next to 10 Disney-owned franchise films, it doesn't do anything. But people already have a Netflix subscription. People are going to watch this, and I think people are watching it. It's brand new. It's only been out a few weeks.
Yeah.
And there is some buzz. I've noticed, like, there are a lot of podcasts talking about this movie, and there's articles written on it. And like I said, there's a response to it in the way that there was for, what's the Elizabeth Moss movie we watched?
I don't know. What?
Invisible Man.
Yeah, yes.
You know, like these movies that have come straight to video and have performed super well, and people are really surprised by it. And it's like, I don't know if it's going to do those numbers in the theater, but they're doing great just straight to video. And I think that's great.
Yeah. When there's less effort involved in picking the movie, when you can just put something on and go on your
and
phone
you're paying,
or whatever.
And you're paying for it anyway. It's not a trip to the theater that costs you $60. It's here with your Netflix bundle,
You already bought the movie.
And you can shut it off in 10 minutes if it's not. You can try it. Like, I think that's the benefit of something like Netflix. And like I said, like, the best produced TV movie is what Netflix does. And for them to get Charlize Theron and Chiwetel Ejiofor in there,
right?
I mean, those are not slough stars, man. Like, those are big names.
I'm kind of
to
interested what budget they gave this movie, because there's some good CGI in there too.
It's not bad. There's some good stuff that I think is green screen but still looks good. There's some good practical effects and stunt work.
Right.
There's a great cast. I mean, it really is. One of the articles I saw online today was like, the old guard proves you don't need a Marvel budget to make an entertaining action movie. And I would agree with that. My shortcomings for this movie aside, I have a lot of shortcomings with Marvel movies too.
This is better than most Marvel movies.
But the idea that you can put together a comic book based action movie without spending $1 billion on it. You know what I mean? They didn't have to pay Robert Downey Jr. $50 million just to walk onto a green screen set. Like, Netflix put together a good action movie, with a fraction of the budget. And I think I applaud them for that.
That's actually what worries me about the idea of a sequel for this movie is the money that movie gets is going to be based on how many people streamed this movie, what the perception of it was. So, like, it's
how
very
much people are
dependent.
talking about it, how much,
So our podcast is helping fund the second movie.
I mean, honestly, if the response is good, if they can show that people are interested enough to subscribe to Netflix that weren't already.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like those kind of things. It is sort of like, oh, they'll give them more money for it.
Yeah,
So,
but I'm afraid that what they're going to do
that it becomes
is
about
give it like $10 and it's just going to be a really bad movie.
They go the other way and they gut it.
Yeah,
and
that's what I'm thinking.
That happens too with sequels. You know, it
Yeah.
just becomes like, oh, now it's a name. Now we don't have to try, and it becomes
Right.
like, Well, I guess we'll wait and see because, like we said, I think at least one more movie is definitely
it's coming. Yeah.
Is that good? You got anything else?
No, I think that's our thoughts.
Okay, cool. Let's close this out and move on to shoutouts. Who do you got this week?
For shoutouts, let me see. I found an artist on TikTok this week. His name is Joshua Hayes. It's spelled a little weird, so we're going to put the name in the description.
Yeah.
But he does some really cool, almost gothic art.
Okay.
A lot of weird faces and dark shadows. And I was just really interested in what he was making.
It's like real detail oriented. Yeah. That's wild.
So he makes videos on TikTok,
Okay.
and that's how I found him.
All right. Very cool.
What about you?
This week, I want to shout out my old Brokebot Mountain co-host, David Luzader, and his new show, Hit Me One More Time. It is, it's on the Frog Pants mega feed and also his own feed. That is a nostalgia reflection show where guests come on and they bring something that they loved as a child. It can be an album, it can be a TV show, a movie.
Right.
And they watch it and they talk about it and discuss whether or not it held up.
That's a cool concept.
It's a really cool concept. I've been on a couple episodes. I talked about the old Batman, the 1989 Batman movie with them.
Right.
It's a really, really fun show in a really interesting way and a really honest way to look at nostalgia. You know, how much is nostalgia coloring how much I love this thing? And then looking at it as an adult after not having seen it for a long time. It's really an interesting concept.
That's especially in the age of remakes.
Sure.
And
I think it's
80s
really
nostalgia.
timely.
Like,
Yeah, David has put this show together. I'm really proud of him because it really fits his personality. It's a super interesting and a super fun show, and he's got some great people on there.
What's it called again?
It's called Hit Me One More Time. And yeah, that's available wherever you get podcasts. It's a really great show. Check it out.
Cool.
That's going to do it for this episode of The Picture Show with Austin and Phil Rood. We thank you for listening and ask that if you enjoy our show to please leave a review on your podcatcher of choice. It really helps our visibility and helps us grow the show.
Yeah, another way you can help us is if you tell a friend, any movie fans in your life, if you know any, just tell them about our podcast, and they're sure to like it. And if they don't, we'll hunt them down.
That's if they're not friends of yours if they don't like our show.
Exactly.
You don't need those kind of people in your life.
Toxic. Very toxic.
Very, very. Cancel them. Austin, you've got the wheel next week. What are we watching?
You've actually mentioned it this episode.
What?
2001: A Space Odyssey.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I better get cracking. I've got a book to read and a movie to watch then, because we have to do the full multimedia experience.
Let's just do the movie.
All right, let's do the movie. I can't wait. It's really fun.
Yeah.
I can't wait just to see your reaction to it.
I haven't seen it, so
It's going to be really cool.
I like that Hal character. He seems friendly.
He's really nice.
Yeah.
He's really helpful. It's nice to see, AI that's, really clicked in with humanity.
Yeah.
It's really great to see.
Big ally.
Yeah, totally. Drop some acid and hang out with Hal. Really looking forward to that. Good pick. Austin, what's your social media handles you want to run down?
Right. I'm on Instagram and TikTok at austin.n.rood.
All right. I am philrood.com, and I'm posting episode stuff there. I know we've not put up social media stuff for the show. I'm still debating whether or not to do that, but right now, at Phil Rood on Twitter, I'm posting show stuff there. At PhilRood75 on Instagram, and links to YouTube. I'm putting these up on YouTube with some drawing videos and stuff like that. Maybe we'll get our stuff to. I've tried so hard to step back from social media. I don't know if I want more social media accounts.
Adding another account is just a whole other thing.
Yeah, it becomes a real chore. But you can talk to us about stuff on the show just through our regular social media accounts.
Yeah, we love talking to people.
Absolutely. So if you've got comments or anything, hit us up on any of those ats and tell us your thoughts on these movies.
Please.
Austin, you want to read the credits?
Sure, we do everything ourselves.
This week, though, we do have special guest star Amy Frost, top of the show, helping us out with the table read.
Correct.
So thank you very much, Amy.
Thanks, Amy.
We do everything ourselves except for that. We
Yes.
couldn't have done that without you. Playing the part of Andy
Our
is
talented-
Amy Frost from Ake Willow. There you have it. We will see you guys next time on The Picture Show with 2001: A Space Odyssey.
See ya. ASMR with the Roods.
Okay. Welcome to the ASMR Roodcast.
Soft but rude noises.
Soft rude noises.